we are in our Hatari-based Atari Falcon, at the same point we were at the end of the last video. We'd installed and configured and road tested the Genie desktop, and everything is good. As it stands, the hard drive image that I share with you guys has got 4 desktops on it: TerraDesk, Thing, Ease, and Genie. In fact, actually, it's 5 if you include Emutos as well. And that's a lot of desktops. So I want to achieve a few things today. One thing I want to do is to make all of those desktops more usable and identifiable. I'm going to put a common set of applications down here that will be the same across all of these desktops. So you'll be able to find stuff the minute you get on any one of these. And at the moment, the different desktops look more or less the same and are difficult to tell apart. So I want to find a way to indicate on each desktop what desktop it is. And I also want to kind of roll the welcome mat out on this machine. I want to be able to have a link on the desktop that you can click on that gives you a readme about the drive image, what's on it, and more importantly probably, what's changed since the last release / episode of it. And to do that, I'm going to use STGuide. Now, a lot of this is going to be configuration, but as part of getting a build system in place that's going to allow us to build our help pages, we're going to want to have some kind of Unix tooling to achieve that. So the big thing in this episode is going to be sourcing some Unix tools and getting a window that will run TOS applications and Unix applications like we did with the CLI for NeoDesk. And while we're speaking of NeoDesk, since I've spent an awful lot of time talking to you guys about it, I want to add NeoDesk to this build. So that's quite a lot of stuff to do in this video, and I'm going to try and mostly show you what I did to get something working without necessarily showing you everything I did step by step, because otherwise this video is going to be hours long. I said earlier that I wanted to be able to tell that this was Genie desktop when I booted into it. So I mean, we have a very simple mechanism for achieving this in Genie, and that's desktop notes. So let's just do that. Now I'll move this down here, so the next time we boot into this desktop, I'll just know straight away that it's Genie. Now, to achieve our goal of having a welcome page, what I'm going to do is install Hypeview and put it on the desktop. So let's go into opt-gem Hypeview and drag that onto the desktop. So double clicking that at the moment will tell you that it can't find a catalog file, and that's because we haven't generated one. We'll do that in a second. Finally, I want to install COPS on the desktop for ease of access to it, so we can have some control panel action. So these are the apps that I'm going to put on the desktop at the moment, and I'll repeat that across all the other desktops where possible. Now, not all desktops have notes, but where notes are available, you'll be able to see them. And Hypeview isn't available on all of the systems, so in some of the systems you would have to go to the desktop menu and use STGuide. Before we go any further, let's just open COPS, and what we'll see is we don't have any control panels. And that's because when I created this disk image, I based it off the one that we used for Geneva and NeoDesk, but I actually cut most of the stuff out. In the episodes file for this video, we have all the files that we need to copy across to get Geneva and NeoDesk working. Now, we're not going to be using the installers, just drag and drop. So the files on the right are a dump of that C drive, and the ones on the left are the root of my current Mint-based system. So there's a couple of things I want to do to tidy up the root of my C drive, actually. I mean, you know I'm a bit picky about that. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to move the guides folder into GemSys. Well, yeah, I should have moved it, but I didn't. So now I'm just going to delete the original because it'll have copied it in there. Next, I'm going to merge the guides folder from etc on my old machine. And I'm just copying everything over, and I'll skip anything that's already on the current machine. So what's next is accessories. Now, I'm not going to have them in the root like I did on the old system. I'm going to put them in my bin folder. And also thinking of it, maybe putting them in GemSys might be more sensible later, but let's see how it feels. Next, let's have a look at our auto folder. Currently, all we have in our auto folder under Mint is Mint, NVDI, and that's it really, Xboot. The auto folder for Geneva came with a few more things. So again, I'm just going to copy them over and just skip what's already on the current machine. So this accessory loader here is not the one that we used under Geneva. This accessory loader is a lot more flexible and will load from any folder on your disk, whereas the old one would only load from C root ax. And to tell it where to pick up its accessory files from, we just edit this file, and we're going to set that to C bin ax. Now, we aren't actually going to use this accessory for Geneva and NeoDesk, but we will need it in other non-Mint sets like Emutos if we want to have accessories in that. Let's merge our bin folder next. Now, we don't need BT fonts, we've already got that, but we'll be taking the NeoDesk command line interpreter, all of the CPX files, because as we saw previously, we don't have any installed at the moment. We'll take our commands folders and games. Next, we'll hop up into Gem Apps and see what we might want to move across from there. And I'm going to take the icon manager, Papyrus, QED and sysinfo. And yes, that's going to mean that we have 2 copies of QED in the system, but I know this version works on Gem and I'm not sure about the one that's installed under Mint. It's probably the same thing, but I'm not 100% sure. Better safe than sorry. Next, the 2 main actors in this, Geneva and NeoDesk, they just come straight across. And the only thing to do to get them working is to go into Geneva and into gem.cnf and set the accessories path to cbin.ax. Finally, we'll have a look at our root folder items. We need control.inf for xcontrol and neoauto.bat. That's the initialization script I created for the CLI environment and the NeoDesk. And we also need stguide.inf to configure stguide. Right. Let's go into Xboot and create a set for NeoDesk. But first, notice the accessories list is empty and the CPX list is empty too. That's because we put them in non-standard places. So let's just go into parameters and set the paths to our locations. And now when we get back to the main screen, notice we have all the accessories and control panels available. So now we'll get around to creating that NeoDesk set. Okay, I'll just quickly save that. And I want to move our new entry up near the top. And to do that, I'm going to go into Tools, Sort, and tell it to sort set names. And that looks much better to me. Now, what do we want to enable for NeoDesk? We don't need Axe, as I've said. That gets picked up by Geneva. We will need the Calvino font selector, Geneva itself, obviously, and jar 10. We don't need Mint. We do need Neoload, and we definitely need these 2. So let's save that. Now let's go over and look at our running order. And for this, we need jar 10 to load before just about anything. So I'm going to drag it up there. And after that, everything's in the right order. So I'm going to enable stguide, task manager, and xcontrol for this NeoDesk set. And then I'm going to select some of the CPXs that I want to be visible. After that, let's boot it and see what we get. And straight in, boom. It's looking good. And that loaded so fast, you forget how much overhead Mint actually has on load time. Now we have our accessories and control panel available from the system menu. And then if we run stguide, we'll get a complaint. Obviously, it can't open the main file because it doesn't know where it is yet, and we'll fix that soon. So what I want to do now is just change over quickly to 256 color mode under NeoDesk. Now this is hardly as auspicious, is it? And that's because all of our icons are actually in black and white. I've been banging on over all of my videos about how NeoDesk had one of the best icon managers that there ever was. So let's open it. And if we go down here, you can see it only supports a maximum of 16 colors. So let's just take an example. Let's say we go into Gemsys, MyES, Desk, Icons, and open the BE folders resource file. And these are the Genie icons. They're only showing in 16 color mode, but you know, they still look good to me. And I could set this one as the generic folder icon by dragging it over to the folder over there. Copy the icon and rules. Let's go out, save and quit. And now when we go into C drive under NeoDesk, well, there it is. And it looks pretty good, I think. So if you just indulge me for a little bit, I'm going to disappear off and then come back in a bit. Post a little bit of playing around and having far too much fun in the icon editor. Doesn't she look gorgeous? We have our standard file structure still, but now we've got some nice icons associated with it. So for our stguide files, where we have them in different languages, I've created a set of folders for those with little flags indicating where they're from. I really like this. Oh, NeoDesk. If only you were 256 color aware, you'd still be the best desktop, I think. But never mind. So the next thing we're going to look at is stguide. Right now, if we go into stguide, we'll get an error saying there's no main help page. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about how stguide works because I did an entire video about it previously. And there'll be a link at the top right of the screen to that video right now. And I suggest, after you watch this, go watch that. If you want to understand the intricacies of stguide, that is. One thing we never covered in that video, which we're going to cover in this one, is how you create a hype file from scratch. And that's going to be good. I've been around my hard drive and I've hoovered up all of the different hype files for all of the different apps that we've installed so far. As a result of that, I've added a new language. Now we need to make some modifications to our stguide file, and all I've done is change the paths to the guides folder to be under Gemsys rather than where it used to be under bin. It's the same file that we had in the last installation, and one other additional change I made was to change the catalog file name to be starting with a K, which is the German spelling. And why did I do that? Well, it seems to play better with Hypeview under Mint. And the other thing we're going to be doing is adding a new homepage, which is going to be our welcome mat, as I said previously. I'm going to set the default hype page that gets loaded when stguide starts up to be c4f_index.hyp. And in there we'll put some text, and for each video when I upload a new image, it'll say what's changed and what's new. For now it's just placeholder text from a while ago. So let's go into the C4F folder under guides. And here is the script that builds the index file. It's built using a bat file that runs under NeoCLI, and it produces these two files, which then get copied down into the main guides folder. And the source for those two files is this STG file. Now, I'm not going to take you through it in any great detail, but an stguide file is a markup file, not unlike HTML, but probably far more similar to prof and trof that used to be under Unix. There's a little bit of metadata at the top that says like who the author is, for example, and what version it is, which is actually just based off the macro that puts the current date in there. And then it has nodes. So you have the main node, and if you notice up here, there's a setting in there for the help node, which is help for this guide. And if we scroll down, there'll be a second node. There it is with the matching name, help for this guide. So when you press the help button in stguide or Hypeview, this is the node that will get loaded. Let's not call them pages, that will confuse us. So main node is the first one that's loaded. And we can mark text in here as, in this example, bold, using this curly bracket syntax. And here we see a little bit of italics text. So that's all well and good, but how do we convert this raw stguide file into a hype file? Well, I wrote a script to do this. Let's have a look at it. And there's nothing magical about it. I declare some variables. This points to the tools to build our hype files, which are in cbin cmd. And let me show you where that is. And most of these files are going to be deleted, by the way, because I want to put in proper Unix versions of them later in this video. But under here we have the reflink tool, the stool tool, misses, and the HCP or the hypertext compiler tool. So my guides are indicated by this variable, and they're stored under gemsys guides. And the source file is currently in gemsys guides C4F. So to build the hype file, if you look at the order of the script, we go into the source folder, we run the HCP command, then the script copies the two outputs into the folder below, and then we cd into there, we run the still command to create the catalog, and then we run reflink to update the old.ref, and finally we go back to where we were. So if I run that now, which I can do by a double click, you can see it races through, and now if we go back up a level, we should have our index file in here. So let's run stguide, and there's our page and our content. And of course I'll have to update this before I ship the image to my old blog site. Everything's good. We have an index file, we have a catalogue. Now, if you'll notice, there's a lot of German content in that file. There is a way of setting those translations to be a different language, and I will do that probably before I ship this image if I get a chance. So that's our help file system kind of sorted. Now, to be able to double click on a hype file and get it to run, well, for a start, that won't work in NeoDesk. There you will have to go through the stguide accessory. But on other desktops, we can achieve that. Post a reboot and going into Genie, we want to get everything working in the same way for Hyperview as it was for stguide. Now, there's a little wrinkle of complexity here. For Hypeview, its configuration file lives in hypeview.cfg, and that was originally stored in uopt-gem hypeview. Now I've moved that into the root folder, and I've edited the content to match the same values stored inside of stguide.inf. So why did I put it in root? A well-behaved Mint program looks for its config here in root, and if you can't find it there, it'll fall back to trying to find it in its directory. Now the advantage of this is, should another version of Mint get released in the future, which I guess is a possibility, not a very big one, but it's a possibility, then all I would have to do is copy contents of the root folder over to the contents of the new root folder in the new distribution, and all of the configs would come across in one go without me having to grub around in all the different folders to find them. So now if I run Hypeview, we'll get our default homepage, which is good. So we have our index and our hierarchy of pages. So what else did I do? So I went into applications and I created an application for the Hypeview app. And I associated that with star.hype for both open and show. So now if we go into our guides folder and we double click on, say, genie.hype, we have Genie help. All very good. So next, we need to configure how apps find the help system should they need it. Now this is a little bit all over the map on the ST. In some places you define environment variables that contain an ST guide variable that points to where ST guide is. They're actually in the myaes.cnf. But for other apps you have to do it manually. So let's have a look at QED. And if we go into options global, it has an entry for the help server, so you need to choose where that lives. Now unfortunately this file selector is not aware of the U drive and thinks they're all files. So I think one thing we're going to need in a future episode is a new file selector that will be able to handle Mint better. But let's go into C, Mint version, then into sysroot, opt, gem, hypeview, and select the hypeview app. Okay, let's save those new options. Quit out of QED. Go back in again, go back into our options and click help. And hey, there you go, we have built-in help. So what I want to do now is I want to set up a command line environment that's going to allow us to both run Unix commands and TOS commands in Windows. Well, actually, I say I'm going to set it up. It's already there and has been working since the last episode. What I wanted to point out was how it works and how we configure it a little. Right now, if I was to run a TOS command, see how it opens in the window, and then once it's finished, it says press return to close the window, and then the app terminates. That's because it's running in TOSWin, and TOSWin is not set up to auto close after apps complete, so it'll always stay open. So I'm going to go in and set it to auto close, and then I'm going to save the settings. Now I'm going to run it again, and it should just run and exit. That's the behavior that I want if I run it from a double click in a window. Now how does this hang together and configure? Well, it's all done in myaes.conf. If we look for the string TOSWin, we'll see here that we've opted to start TOSWin when the system boots. So we run it. Under this, there's an environment variable called TOSWin, and that points to an app called twcall.app, which is in the same folder as TOSWin. And what does this magic app do? Well, twcall is the app that the desktop will use to actually run TOS programs. And what twcall does is it checks to see if TOSWin is already running, and if it isn't, it starts it. That way we'll only get one copy of TOSWin running no matter how many TOS apps we run. And then what it does is it passes parameters to TOSWin, telling TOSWin what application to run and what associated command line flags plus the environment variables, etc. that it needs to run. TOSWin then executes the app, traps its input and output and handles that within the window. So basically these two things are two parts of the same app. Now twcall does one other thing. If it's invoked with a -L flag, it will instruct TOSWin to open a console window. Now this is something I really want on my desktop because I'm going to use it a lot. So let's get that set up. We're going to go back to the TOSWin folder. I'm going to look at twcall.app. Let's install that as an application. Yes, I want to install it. That's what I just asked you to do. Anyway, we'll invoke it with a -L flag. OK that, and save the desktop. Now, if I double click twcall, it starts up a window and I can type in whatever I want. So if I want that on my desktop, I'm going to drag it on, and then I'm going to rename it to shell. Right, so let's check if installing twcall as an application with a -L flag affects apps running with a double click. And no, it still closes after execution. So we've got the best of both worlds. We can open a shell that we can work in, or we can just have a transitory shell that we need. Okay, little daft bit. By default, the Mint host name is Saturn. Now, the host name doesn't really matter a whole bunch as it is because we're not on the network, and I doubt this will ever go on the network unless I put it on a real machine. But that name offends me. So let's open the mint.config file and find the string Saturn. And I mean, there is only one possible host name for a really good computer, so let's set that to LC4F and save and close that and have a bit of a reboot. So post the reboot. Let's have a look at the shell, and it seems to be working absolutely fine. Now, let's go into cbin command and run the stool application from within the window, because this is the third thing to test, that if it's run from within a window, it should not close the window when it finishes, which it doesn't. This is excellent. And of course, we now have our sexy new machine name of C4F. So we've got ourselves a command line interface, and we've got ourselves a window to run in, but what we really have is just a tiny amount of Unix tills that we can run, and certainly not as many as we need. So let's beef that up, shall we? So how and where are we going to source our Unix command line tools from? Well, thankfully, Vincent Riviera, and I'm sorry if I've butchered that name, Vincent, he's got us covered for this. He has a collection of popular free software for Atari Mint that he's cross-compiled for the 68000 and for the 68020 to 68060 architectures. I mean, it kind of looks a bit scary, doesn't it? But there's everything here from Vim to tar. And I'm going to start with core utils. Currently we're rocking a 68040 processor in Hatari, so let's download that version. And once downloaded, let's have a peek in the archive. So we have a folder user with subfolders for bin and share. Share contains things like man pages, which I always love to see, and bin contains many Unix commands. So how are we going to get these onto our Hatari instance, and is this all that we need? Well, I ended up actually downloading quite a lot more files than I actually expected to. So while the core utils have a lot of things in it that we want, there are things like arc, zoo, zip, vim, unzip, unrar, sed, and make that just aren't in there. And make is important for me because eventually I want to use it to build my welcome hypertext page to replace the old NeoDesk script. And the tar package is begging an interesting, shall we say, a bootstrapping question. How am I going to untar all of these packages on the Hatari side when I don't have tar? So I'm just going to extract all of these archives and then I'm going to re-archive them in a single tarball. I'm going to move that over to the Hatari world and then unarchive them there. So let's first unarchive all of the files on the Mac. So I'm issuing the following command in Kitty, and it's a for loop, and it says for each one of these BZ2 files, tar minus xjzf that file, and then loop to the next one. So X is for extract, J is to specify bzip2 processing, V is for BOS, and F is to specify a file name. And we do that via the for loop variable. So what we've got at the end of this is a file structure and what would be in /bin, and we have more in bash. And in /user we have a bin folder with loads of command line tools in it. Now I'm just going to quickly create a tar file of all of this to move across. And I'll copy that across to the Hatari instance and I'll see you on the other side. So now when we create the tar file before we move it across, if you're on a Mac like I am, you have to make sure to install GNU tar, not use the built-in tar command on the Apple. The reason being that Apple's tar is based on the BSD tar command and it puts all sorts of stuff in that will cause trouble extracting it on the other side. Our files are going to be stored in the file system under /user, and /user doesn't exist at the moment. So the way Mint handles this is that it has its own root called sysroot, which is in here, and that's where all the root level folder hangs off. Now I want to do the same thing, but I don't want to put my new commands for user in sysroot, because again, if we update the version of Mint at some point in the future, we'll lose that association. So I'm going to create my own root. And of course, I'm going to do that in the command line because we are command line people. Going into the C drive, let's create our own root folder, which I'm going to call C4root. And in there, I'm going to extract the archive. It's going to have the user folder in it, and it's going to have the bin folder too. We'll decide what to do with those files in a bit. So in our episode 28 folder, we have the tar command and we have the actual tarball we want to extract. So running /c episodes /0028/tar xvf, same path command.tar, and again x being extract, v being verbose, and f being specifying the file name. Now, when I did this the first time, there were some errors that popped up saying tar exited with an error because of previous errors happening, and I couldn't spot the error in the vomitous output. So I'm just going to pipe standard out into tar.std, and now it's going to run silently. And thinking about it, I could have just removed the v flag from tar, but hey, I was a bit tired when I did this. We'll see what the error was and we'll decide if it's important. And I'm going to jump ahead because it's going to take quite some time. We're extracting a 70 meg tar file. So there's our error saying we cannot hard link to /user bin unzip, which is fine because what it's trying to do is create zipinfo as an alias of unzip, and I've never used zipinfo. Now I had a look in the bin folder here under the extracted files, and the version of bash that was in there was the same as the one currently installed, so I'm going to ignore it. And since there wasn't a version of make in the bin folder, I did copy that across. Then I removed the bin folder. So now we have our user and our sbin folders. And what we're going to need to do is map those two folders into the root file system. So now we need to go into our mint.cfg and we're going to symbolically link our two folders into the root. We'll uncomment out the user link and edit it to point to our new folder. So we're setting c:/c4f root user to /user, and then setting c:/c4f root /sbin to /sbin. Now we need to make sure that /user bin and /user sbin are on our path. And well, there they are, they're already on there. So let's have a quick reboot and see what we've got. I've rebooted and we're back at the desktop. So let's load up our shell and have a look at what we've got. So we installed our software to /user, and in there we see we have a bin, include, exec, sbin, share, and var. Obviously, by far the most important one for us is /user/bin. And if we look in there, we see a large amount of applications that we installed. Now we put these on our path, so they should be instantly accessible. Is that working properly? Let's run the sleep command, and we're going to sleep 3 seconds. and 3 seconds later it's done. So that's working. Now, how does the sleep command work? Well, the man command should come to the rescue here. So in user man1, there's lots of manual pages, including the one for sleep. So we should just be able to say man sleep and it should come up with a help page. But it doesn't. So obviously there's still some more configuration to be done. Now, if we clear the screen, well, it doesn't, because the clear command isn't found yet. And that's because we haven't installed the package that contains it. But what that also means is we haven't installed ncursors. And ncursors is a thing that includes terminfo. Terminfo is a system that tells tools how to access the console and how to position the cursor, change colors, things like that. So if we looked at an app that heavily uses cursors, like Vim, we get a hot pile of garbage. So in the next video, I'm going to carry on configuring our system and getting these things working. And this is all part of the task to replace the NeoDesk CLI batch file that builds the welcome page with a nice Unix style makefile. And then we can carry on down the route of becoming Unix shell wizards. So before I ship this episode hard drive image, I'm going to have to update the welcome page and go over all the other desktops and make sure that we have feature parity where possible. That's just to say that the image file might be a day or two late this week, and I apologize for that. However, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.